Hello, true believers. This is Hank Garner.
This is M.A. Phipps.
Hey, this is Andy Peliquin.
Hey guys, this is Ernie Howard. You're listening to
30
minute
author interviews
with my buddy Preston Lay.
Woohoo!
Welcome everybody to this week's episode of 30-minute author interviews. Our guest today is author Ben Hale. Thank you for joining us today.
Happy to be here.
For those that might not know too much about you, why don't you kind of tell them who you are and what you do?
So I'm what you would call a reluctant writer, meaning I didn't start out as a writer. I didn't take English classes and plan on publishing and becoming a published author. But when I was a kid, I read a lot. I really enjoyed reading, and I started to think of a story, and that story kind of built. And I didn't tell anyone about it until after I was married, and my wife asked me how I fell asleep so fast. And I said, I have this story I think about. And so I told her, and she encouraged me to write it. And fast forward 4 years, I was publishing my books, and 6 months later, it was enough that I could quit my job or sell my company and start writing full time. I now have 15 books out. My 16th comes out in December. It's currently 4 series that span a massive timeline of 10,000 years, and it's just a really big series. I write full time. And, I speak at events and everything. It's just crazy, but it's the best job I could ever hope for.
I bet. Your universe that you've created is called Lumineia.
Correct.
What inspired that world that you created in your head?
I was curious about, the world creation started because I was initially curious. Honestly, from Lord of the Rings. I'm a fan of Lord of the Rings, but I always wondered why in this final battle at the end of that third book, it's really just a small group of humans at Minas Tirith that are fighting. And some people show up from Gondor, but really, they call it like the great battle of their time and all this stuff, but there's no one else that comes. There's no dwarves. You have a few elves that show up, but it's not like a mass thing. And the idea sparked in my mind. I was curious what would happen if a foe was so great that it forced every single race in an entire world to unite under a single banner. And I wanted to play with that. I wanted to see where that would go. And it kind of created that idea of light versus dark. And what's really evil isn't when someone's making bad choices, but someone who wants to destroy everybody. And that's where the Chronicles of Lumineia, so like the world of light, was kind of created. And that's what my first series kind of builds upon, and it builds to a battle that takes place between, on one side, you've got elves and dwarves and humans and goblins and barbarians and Amazons and pirates and, all these different races, rock trolls, giants, that all are on one side fighting a war that they can't win. Even gathered and united as they are, they still can't win the battle. And the entire third book is one massive battle. It's huge.
That is awesome. So when you were creating your world, what was the hardest part in creating it? And then how did you overcome that?
I think the hardest part initially as a writer is that I knew so much about my world. I wanted the reader to understand it early. And my early drafts of my book were really front-loaded with a lot of backstory and history and things like that. And I realized that slowed the story down so much that it detracted from it. And so the hardest thing was to pull back and let this gradual immersion into the world take place over the course of multiple books and multiple series, and be okay with the reader not understanding the entire history that I've built over 15 years at one time.
I want to back up a second. You said when you were growing up that you read a lot. What kind of things did you read, and what was your favorite genre growing up?
I would definitely say fantasy. I really liked fantasy as a kid. Terry Brooks, R.A. Salvatore, Lord of the Rings, like I mentioned. I really liked reading fantasy. Harry Potter is awesome, of course. And each of them have their pros and cons to them. I do say that I like the fantasy books that are much more action oriented. Some fantasy authors, there's a lot of lag time. There's a lot of downtime between action. And so you might have 6 chapters where they're traveling. And any of my books are not like that. I detest this long, drawn out, just talk and talk and talk. And it never feels like it's going anywhere. So my books are not like that. Anyone that reads mine will find that if action isn't happening, it's probably going to happen soon.
Right. Yeah, that's one thing I've really enjoyed when I've been reading your books is there are places where you could have expanded on it and, drawn it out, but you don't. You keep the story moving and you keep the reader engaged, and that is something that I definitely enjoy when I am reading your stories.
Oh, thank you.
And as you said, all your series tie in to this world of Lumineia. How many books? I heard in one interview you were thinking about having a total of 40 books in this world. Are you still aiming for 40 books in this world?
I am. So part of what I wanted to explore was a timeline fantasy, in the sense that each of my series take place. There's usually time gaps. Some are small time gaps, but like I said, one is 10,000 years. I think the largest time gap between 2 of my series will be like 20,000 years. And it's long enough that the world changes and it becomes something that's different. Races can change, people can change. And I wanted to connect. I wanted to link in the same timeline different genres. So the series that we were talking about before, the second Draken War, is a fantasy world of Lumineia. And my second series that I wrote is the White Mage Saga, and it's in modern-day Earth. And when you read it early on, you learn that Lumineia evolved into Earth, and it's the same world. And all of those plot threads connect between the two. And you can see how one is the history of the other, and how choices that were made then can track into what's happening now.
So how many years will the whole series end up covering?
50,000 years. I want to cover the entire timeline of a world from very beginning all the way through to modern day Earth and beyond. Like, I want to cover a massive timeline, all in the same, so it covers epic fantasy, modern fantasy, urban fantasy, science fiction, all in the same massive timeline.
Do you find it hard to jump back and forth in between kind of those different genres?
Because of the time gaps that I have, it's easier. Okay. So, 10,000 years is a really, really long time.
Right.
And so, theoretically, if you've got a magical world of Middle Earth, and it, like Lord of the Rings, if you gave that world enough time, it's conceivable that some of the fantasy races would either die off or intermingle until that, it's gone and magic becomes a myth and it's not really real anymore. So it could theoretically be plausible, which is what I play upon.
And at the beginning of each of your books, you have a map of the world. Who created that drawing of your world? Was that something you did?
So I actually personally drew that.
Okay.
And it's funny that you mentioned that, because I dislike that drawing. It's kind of grainy. It's not phenomenal. It's just a pencil. It took me a few tries. And I do plan on, I have a really good artist now, and I do plan on having him build a really high quality map, or a couple of maps that can show not just like the world map, but regional maps.
Okay.
So I do plan on doing that at some point in the future.
Sounds good. And in the first book of the second Draken War, it's called, I might say it wrong. Is it Elsarian?
That's correct. Elsarian.
You have some sketches in the book of characters and certain areas that they're at. Did you draw those as well?
No, I did not draw those.
Okay. They're very nice. I like them.
They are. They're very good. Some are just stunning. And I found a friend of mine that his brother was a really good, just a black and white pencil artist. And so I asked him to sketch something for me. Mm-hmm. And I was really happy with it. So I asked him to sketch, I think there's like 12 or 14 images in the print book of Elsirion.
Yeah.
And he did that, and it worked out really good. I would have liked to do artwork throughout all my books, but it just wasn't feasible. So that was just the only one that's got the extra art.
My favorite one that I've run into, and I can't remember the name of the place off the top of my head, is it where the fairies live?
No, it's the elves.
The elves. Yes, Azertorn and the elves. And you've got the tree with the water going around on both sides. It's so cool. I like it.
Yeah, that city is built into a cliff, 1,000-foot cliff called the Giant Shelf. And there's two huge waterfalls on either side, and this river splits above the city. And so the city is built in like these recessed tiers inside this cliff, and there's all these plants and gardens and everything that are on it. And then there's one massive tree in the center that the elves can walk across these huge branches to connect between these different levels of the city.
It's such a cool drawing, and I thought it fit perfect in with the story. So,
thank you.
And on the cover and spines of your book is a little code to the readers, I like to call, telling you where in the timeline you are. So, for example, with your first book, Elsirion, it says 4S-329. Can you explain to the readers what that is? And is that something that you created?
That is something I created. I knew that if I was going to do this massive timeline, that I needed to make it easier for readers to track when events were taking place. And so before I published the first book, I planned out, if I'm going to span 50,000 years, each 10,000 year period I called a centennium, which I guess there isn't an actual word to describe a 10,000 year period. There's only a millennium, which is 1,000 years. Mm-hmm. So I came up with centennium. And so the 4S stands for the fourth centennium, year 329.
Okay.
And I wanted to make it so that readers, if they wanted to, they could put all of my books on their shelf in chronological order. It wouldn't necessarily be in series order because some of the books, they intermingle and they cross. I even have 2 series that interact in such a way that there is a single event that when you read one series, it's told from one perspective. And when you read the other series, it's told from the other perspective, which was really cool to see.
That is awesome. Have you ever had anybody read your stories in chronological order, or do they normally just read it by publication date?
If someone has, they haven't told me.
Okay.
I know of some that have read a couple things out of order from the Second Draken War, or from a Triton story and Jack Missed the Thief series that I'm writing this year. Theirs mingle even more than anything else. So there's definitely some crossover, and you can see how the events in one series affect an event in another series, like different characters and what choices they make. Mm-hmm. Or how I have one character, for example, at one point, there's a coup in the Assassin's Guild, and one of the assassins gets killed. And in the series I'm writing now, the assassin's daughter now is coming back for retribution, but she's not even mentioned in the other series. So like what occurs in one has a bearing on what happens somewhere else. And there's plot threads that connect between all of them, which is why I wanted to put that code series, the 4S-329, the date on the book, so that readers could track it and be able to know more of when things are happening.
That is so awesome. So you said that from the time you first published it to when you went writing full time, did you say that was 6 months?
6 months.
I have authors that listen to this podcast as well. Was there one thing that you think you did that helped you be able to go full time with your writing and be able to stop your job to do that?
I would say, if I was to pick one thing, I would say I treated it like a business. And what I mean by that is, before I published, I had 3 books written. I invested $4,000 in editing, cover design. And then when I went to start publishing, I spent 3 months of just flat out research, trying to figure out the best way to do it, figuring out how to set up, advertising, or how to brand your covers, how to, what are the best markets to reach into? What's the right publication schedule? I mean, tons. Should you go KDP Select or go wide release? And so I did an enormous amount of research, and I compiled it in. So I kind of stacked the odds in my favor. I mean, there's no guarantee these days, especially now, but you can increase your odds of success. And if you treat it like a business and brand it and invest into it just like any other business, you treat your books like your products. A series is a product line. Your writing schedule is a product development. And when you look at it with that perspective, then you can help yourself tremendously.
And as you said, you have 15 books out right now, and you seem to put out about 3 books a year. I've
done 3 a year since I started writing full time.
And most of your books are, I would say, I'm trying to remember the printed page count. I want to say it's like around 350 pages.
All of mine are about that length.
What's your writing process like that enables you to put out 3, good-sized novels every year?
When you write full-time, or even when you don't write full-time, consistency is your ally. So when I'm writing, my goal is to average 2,500 words a day. That's what I did this year. It didn't start out that way. Before, I think it was 1,500 words a day. So now I average 2,500 words every day when I'm writing. And if I do that, then my book first draft is about 90,000 words in 7 weeks. And then my editing schedule, I have 13 drafts that I go through. Each one has a purpose, has a quantifiable amount of time. So draft 2, for example, is I edit 60 pages a day. And draft 12, I edit like 90 pages a day. Okay. Because they're cleaner, it's easier to get through. And that editing process includes a professional editor, beta reader drafts. And I know that entire process, almost to the day, is about 6 weeks.
Wow.
So together, it's a 13-week process.
I take it you're very organized then when it comes to everything that you have to do for a book.
I try to be. I mean, I know very few authors that do this to this extent. But frankly, if you want to write full-time, you need to have a systems process that you can manage. If someone came to you and said, for example, let's pretend that you've got an author and they get offered a contract and they get published. And they say, well, we want you to publish at this time next year. You want to be able to know, okay, well, this is how much time I need to edit. This is how much time I need to write. This is how much time I need to brainstorm. You want to know your own process and know that you can achieve it. You need to know how you write, it's like hacking yourself as an author. And I did that my first year, and it was difficult. But I set a consistent schedule, and I managed to keep to it. And so the next year I bumped it up a little and pushed it a little more. And now I average probably close to 3,000 words a day when I'm writing in about 6 hours, because I'm also doing a master's program right now.
Oh, wow.
So I spend 2 hours a day on my master's program.
Wow. How do you keep yourself from getting burnt out on writing that many books every year and keep yourself from getting burnt out in your world that you've created?
That's another asset for me, in that each series is distinct. It's its own characters. So it allows me this great deal of freedom and time gaps and everything. So I don't get tired of it, because I'm always creating something new, and I'm always testing, challenging myself. So it's not, I might come across something and say, oh, I've already used that before. Well, let's come up with something new. So it's a never ending challenge, and that keeps the fun alive and keeps me pushing at it. So like this series, I'm writing Jack Mist, who's a thief. He's an anti-hero. He's kind of witty, impulsive, arrogant, but man, he's so good at what he does. And almost like a fantasy Han Solo kind of character.
Okay.
And so he's enormous fun to write from. But I'll finish him. My third book this year will come out on December 13th, The God Thief. Okay. And then next year I'll be starting a new series. So, it'll start fresh and new, and starting out with a brand new character and a cast, and trying to plan an entirely new series, a new product development.
So for those that have read, I guess, your books or whatever, can you give us any hints on what your new series might kind of be about that you're going to write next year?
The one I'm currently planning is The Age of Oracles is the one I want to write next. That may change as I get close and hear from my beta readers, my editor on this one. Frankly, Jack Mist is so much fun. I wasn't planning this at all in the past, but he's so much fun. I've toyed with the idea of trying to continue. And I may or may not do that right now, but currently The Age of Oracles is where I want to write. It's one I've alluded to and referenced throughout other books. And that's one of the assets that I have. Because I knew what I was already planning on writing, I've created plot threads in the series I've already written for books that I have yet to be written. Okay. So what that means is a book series that I'll write 3 years from now, if a reader reads that first and then comes back and reads an earlier series, there will be connections threaded backwards. So it's not just one directional, it's omnidirectional plot threads.
How many series do you think are going to make up this 40 books that you're looking at doing?
9 to 10.
Okay. Now, do you have all 9 to 10 already kind of mapped out in your head or
yes,
like noted out somewhere?
Yes, I do.
Okay. I first discovered you through Keystroke Medium. You did a little live podcast with them. And on there, you mentioned that you went on a church mission for 2 years. Have you learned anything, and how did that church mission help you in your writing career?
I mean, there's several things that my church mission helped me. The first is discipline, self-discipline, because being a writer, especially a full-time writer, discipline is very, very important. I could skip tomorrow and there would be no consequence for months. Early in the year, I could take a whole week off and there would be no consequence for months. When I earn my income, I've had months that were really good and months that were really bad 6 months later. And so you have to have discipline not to spend it when it's in excess, so that you have that when it is not in excess, when it's less. Mm-hmm. So discipline for sure. I think it also, my church mission gave me, I guess I'd say, like a perspective on the world, on family, and a perspective is essential when you want to write and where you want to publish, because you need to understand different points of view. You need to understand the publishing world, the world in general. You can't write about things that are going to cause a great deal of conflict or things unless you want to deal with that. Like right now, if someone is going to write a book on a political sphere and then publish it and be really pro-Democrat or really pro-Republican or negative against both of them, it would cause a lot of conflict, and a writer needs to be aware of that. They need to be aware of their audience, and I think that my church mission gave me a lot of that perspective.
Now, do you have a process that you go through when creating your characters' names for your series?
The names were actually a real challenge initially, because I didn't have any names, and that was really hard. I'd get stuck in the book because I didn't know the name. I knew the story, I just didn't have the names. So I started collecting names, and when I heard a cool name, I'd write it down, and I'd keep writing it down and keep writing it down. When I hear a name I liked, I'd tweak it a little bit and then write it down. And I would just keep building and building and building until I had a pretty good reservoir. Now I don't have nearly as much problem. I can create names much easier now than I used to. Mm-hmm. And that helps. Part of that is, building that creative process until it's easier.
So this next question maybe might be hard for you. It might be like picking a favorite child. But you have 4 series: the Second Draken War, the White Mage Saga, the Warsworn, and Master Thief. Can you tell us your favorite character from each series and why it's your favorite character from that series?
Yes, I could. And if my children ever listen to this podcast, I will not pick a favorite child.
There we go.
So if I was to pick one, part of that is just because like any author, I put a piece of myself into everything I write, and especially characters. And some characters get more of me than others. Mm-hmm. And for example, my Warsworn trilogy, the entire trilogy is rock trolls. And in most fantasy fiction, rock trolls are really dumb, and they're kind of just brutes, and they're kind of villains, and they fight them, and they're just there to be conflict and battle and things like that. In my series, I wrote them like Spartans. If Spartans were 9 feet tall with thick as tough as leather and trained for war like Spartans are, and get tattoos for every kill. So the rock trolls are awesome.
They are.
And just so cool. But one of the characters is Triton, and he doesn't fight to kill, he fights to protect. And his honor, his strength of character is so strong, he changes his entire race, the culture of his entire race, because his character is so strong, which was so much fun to write. Mm-hmm. And so I really enjoyed putting a lot. And so if I was going to pick one, I'd say he's my favorite character in that series. Okay. And I won't go through one for each of them because it would take too long to explain right now. But I do have a favorite for each of them. That's just the example from the Warsworn. But yeah, for sure, some of the characters are just awesome. And it's really insightful because I've had readers comment and tell me that other characters that aren't my favorite, that they are the favorite for certain readers. Okay. So it means that the broad range of characters has appealed to a broad range of readers.
In the Warsworn series that you just talked about, in your first book in that series, the Flesh of War, the trolls get to pick their weapon of choice when they reach age 8, and they get to choose from a maul, an axe, a staff, a sword, a mace, fist weapons, or wind bows.
It's even more than that. In all honesty, they can pick pretty much anything. At one point in the series, there's a rock troll that his weapon are chains around his wrists and fists.
Yeah.
And that's his weapon. And there's another character that has a hammer blade, which is a sword with a hammer on the end. And so it can cut and crush. And so...
Nice.
And when they turn 15 and they become Warsworn, which is the whole point, which is where the title comes from, mm-hmm. they forge their own weapon. And Triton... There's an entire sequence where he forges his own blade, mm-hmm. and then he tests it against a guardian, which is an awesome sequence.
Right. So if you were a troll, which weapon would you pick and why?
I would pick a Triton Sword just because it's the coolest sword. I mean, his sword is like, I don't know, 5.5, 6 feet tall. It's like one hand wide. It's got a glass core down the center. Mm-hmm. And it's this enormous shining sword. It's so awesome. So yeah, that's probably one I'd pick.
Is that the sword? I'm trying to pull it up real quick. Is that the sword that is on the physical copy of
7 Days?
Okay.
Yeah, that was mine. I actually did that portion of the cover myself on Photoshop. And so I did as close as I could to what I imagined it to be, although I think it would have more glass in the center and be more translucent. Mm-hmm. So, yeah.
Well, here at the Legendarium, we like to end each episode on a kind of not so serious segment called the Legendary Ending.
Okay.
So like I said, these are just, not very serious questions, but just kind of fun ones. So the first one is, what songs are currently on your writing playlist?
So I listen to music occasionally when I write, mm-hmm. and I listen to music that is the mood of what I'm writing, which means I've got music that is, like sad romance, and I've got music that's like pentatonics and music like old school music by Cake. Drive by Cake is a great song.
Yes, it is.
It's a great Incubus. I've got Incubus on there. Pentatonics is probably one of my favorites currently.
Okay.
Some of their songs are just awesome. I'll listen to other things like Usher at certain points. I mean, it just depends on what I'm writing, and sometimes it gets easier to write it if you are in that emotional state when you're writing it.
Gotcha. If you were stuck in a zombie apocalypse with one of the characters that you've created, who would you want to be stuck with and why?
Probably Newhawk. He can turn into a phoenix, and an incredibly powerful one at that. Mm-hmm. So I think I'd be totally safe because he can devastate anything. So I think. Plus, he can fly, of course, and super, super powerful.
If you were stuck in a zombie apocalypse and you could choose any character from anything, who would you pick?
Probably Batman, just because he's Batman and he outthinks everything. And so if anyone would be able to solve a zombie apocalypse, it would be Batman.
That works. If you had a time machine, where would you travel and why?
I wouldn't go anywhere. I love my wife. I love my kids. Everything here. Like, I just am so happy with my life that there's nowhere really that I'd want to go. I mean, it's just, when you're where you want to be, then you don't really want to go anywhere.
Sounds good. I think you're the first person to actually give that answer. So that is a new one here.
Good. I have 5 kids and 1 on the way. My family is huge. I'm building a massive, 250 square foot tree house for my kids.
Nice.
Which is so much fun. So yeah, I mean, it's great.
Well, congratulations on the to-be child.
Yes, thank you.
And if you could have one superpower, what would you choose and why?
Flight. I'm sure a lot of people would say that. My second series, I write where a character learns how to fly and actually goes to class. Like if you went to a school and learns and manipulates gravity magic and learns to will herself off the earth. And I try to write it of what it would feel like. And the character calls it the pinnacle of freedom. And I think that's why I would pick it, is because it would be the pinnacle of freedom to be able to just lift yourself off the earth and not be bound by anything. And I think that's always been a cool concept to me. And so I wrote that into my book. So that's why it would be my answer.
Nice. And then for the question we're kind of famous for, a penguin walks through that door right now wearing a sombrero. What does he say and why is he here?
I don't know. I don't speak penguin.
There we go. Sounds good. And before we leave, do you have any advice, whether it be for writing or for life, that you would like to share with our listeners?
Because you heard about me on the Keystroke Medium, I'll say something that I said there. Writing specifically is a career that requires courage more than other occupations. Everything from the writing itself to the courage to maintain consistency, to write when you don't feel like writing, to dealing with negative reviews, rejection, because we experience a lot of rejection. I've experienced a ton of rejection myself. Overcoming that and continuing it again and again and again and pursuing it requires an enormous amount of courage. And when you understand that that is the asset that you are applying in your life, that attribute that you are pursuing, it does make it easier to pursue it, to continue to carry forward, even when you want to give up or want to quit or don't think you're capable of it. I never thought writing was within my skill set. I didn't think that it was something I could do, let alone make a career out of it. And now I've written 1.6 million words. I'm approaching 150,000 sales, and I have the best job ever that I get time with my spouse and my family, all on something I didn't think I could even do. So when you get discouraged, whether it's in life or especially when you're writing, remember that what you do is the living embodiment of courage.
That is great advice. And where can our listeners go if they would like to learn more about you and your books and your world that you created?
Amazon for sure. All my books are on Amazon, so you can just look me up there. Mm-hmm. If you Google search Ben Hale, I think I'm at the top. Don't confuse me. There's another author named Benjamin Hale.
There
that
is.
wrote a book about a monkey, and so sometimes people get confused by that. Yeah. But if you Google search just Ben Hale, I'm usually the top several ones now. My website is lumineia.com. But again, that shows up if you just Google search Ben Hale. And I think I'm like the top 5 or 6 results on there.
Sounds good. Well, I will put links to your Amazon page and to your webpage in the show notes over at legendarium.com. So if you'd like to learn more about Ben Hale and his books, head on over there and check out the links. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day and coming on 30-Minute Author Interviews. We appreciate it.
Thank you. Appreciate it, Preston.
Well, guys, that's all the time we've got for this episode. Thank you so much for tuning in to 30-Minute Author Interviews, and I hope you come back next Wednesday and every Wednesday for a brand new author interview. And check out the show notes for this episode because Ben Hale has a giveaway. He's giving away a free ebook of his book Elsyrian. So head on over to legendarium.com, legendarium.com, and get registered for the giveaway. Good luck, everybody. And until next time, stay legendary. And if you would, wait and subscribe. It weighs about 250.